vision, then he gave me the mission. I was in hell, then elevated positions. Heaven and hell, two stated conditions. Stop checking for a second, homie, and listen. Because I'm poised to break through the noise beyond the distraction and emergence of voice for you to listen to. Not the mumble rappers that you listen to. It's the nation's hip-hop principle. Allow me to reintroduce myself. What's up, Q, Envy, DJ Self? Take me off the shelf and spin me. Delete these trash rappers and friend me.
I'm Dr. Shango Blake, also known as the nation's hip-hop principal. My students call me Dr. Blizzy. You'll find out about that later. I'm referred to as the nation's hip-hop principal for the work that I've done in terms of improving schools and using hip-hop as part of the process. Using hip-hop as a communication tool, as an instructional tool. If you look now, you'll see a lot of different variations of people using hip-hop in schools. You'll see it in like after-school programs. We've seen our former First Lady Michelle Obama use it to promote the message of health. You've seen it on Broadway now with Hamilton. But when you trace back to the pioneer who started the hip-hop education movement, you're looking at that person. Over 13 years ago, I was able to take a low-performing middle school that nobody wanted to go to, that was on the state list and was second to last in reading and in math. And it became the #1 school in the district, outperforming all the other schools, the most sought-after school in the Jamaica Queens area. And part of what we used as an ingredient for that reform was in fact using hip hop to bring in a different message to the students, to engage them in a way where they change their attitudes towards learning. As a result of this school improving and going from second to last to #1, I decided to take all the things that we had done with hip hop and within this school community and study it. And so I went back to school and got my doctorate, and my research was on transformational leadership and the use of hip hop to improve school culture, and to look at what was the significance of using hip hop. What were the implications for urban schools throughout this country in terms of maybe embracing hip hop as a way in which to engage young people around the learning process. As we know, students often have anti-school attitudes, and hip-hop is known for having anti-schooling themes. So how can we break the wall that exists between where the students are and where the teachers are? How can I, as what would be called an old school hip-hopper, talk to these new school generation about the hip-hop that I love, and how can we use that to bridge the gap between old and young? And that's why the name of my company is called True School. Taking old school ways, new school kids, and then bringing it together, True School. And True School stands for Teaching Reading Uniquely, to reverse underperformance. So we're finding innovative ways to improve schools, to innovative ways to engage young people, and that's the work that I've been involved in since leaving that school. I travel across the country, I work with school districts, help them reform some of their worst schools. I speak about issues in education. I present my research in terms of hip hop in education. And so that's what my goal is to continue to do, is to continue to expand that, to continue to reach out to school districts that people say you can't save or you can't do anything with them. You know, I want to go to the places nobody wants to go to. Send me to Chicago, send me to Detroit, send me to East St. Louis, because I know that the brightest and some of the most brilliant minds are in those schools. And I believe that with the right kind of approach and the right kind of strategy, we can break down barriers, we can break down walls, and we can change what's happening in our inner cities. How many schools have I gotten to improve and change the curriculum? We're looking at right now, from the model that we developed, I would say 10 schools that we have made significant improvements with. And it's not always with me being the school leader. It's been me coming in, working with the next generation of school leaders and consulting with them. I have the benefit of traveling across the country, meeting dynamic, brilliant educators who want to make a change in the lives of young people. And so I present my company and my team, and we come in and we work with those school leaders to find out how can we best support you in your work. And it's interesting because for me, I used hip hop. And I always tell prospective clients that I work with that it may not be hip hop for you. You have to examine your school culture. You have to look at and assess what your students are interested in, what's happening in the community that you're leading. And for you, it may be a gospel choir, it may be a football team, but we have to find things that our young people are interested in, use that to engage them, and then also use that to build what I call cultural competency with the staff to help them understand what it is that the students need and how they can change or modify their teaching to reach these young people. We work with, my company works with K-12 and even higher ed. Because that's a great question because it's so important to be involved in every layer and level of the system, right? Elementary is where the foundational pieces happen as it relates to education. Middle school is just that. It's the middle road. It's the time where children are making all types of decisions. You know, are they gonna get involved in something socially that will take them down a path of destruction? You know, you'll find that most children begin to play with smoking marijuana, drinking, all of that during the middle school years is when they're first introduced to that. So middle school is key. And then of course, high school, preparing them for what happens next in life, whether they go to college or enter into the workforce or what have you. And then I just want to say with higher education, it's a different kind of training that we do. We actually train those professors who are teaching those courses because we want to make sure that if you're a young person and you have a desire to work in an inner city school, you need to understand what you're walking into. You need to understand it beyond theory. You need to understand what happens when you walk into that classroom, how powerful your presence are when you have 25 minds or 33 minds in a classroom and you're working with them. And we get into some of the urban issues in education so that the next graduate or the next teaching force comes in prepared to understand and appreciate who it is that is before them. And that's what I mean when I talk about cultural competency. You can't come from the Midwest into a New York City school if you're not willing to understand the culture of the people who you are actually involved in teaching. It became a part of the school culture. So for 2 months, the students worked on their projects, and it was involved in every subject content area was involved. English, math, science, social studies, phys ed. It was a project-based learning piece. And then we celebrated it by putting on a major function every year at York College. We had skylights, we had red carpet. The students were escorted by police escort to the venue. All the parents are outside, over 1,000-something people coming out to show support for the students. And they were the stars, they were the filmmakers. And they got up there and they got a chance to talk about their vision when they shot this scene, their idea when they came up with this verse, and then they performed, and they learned how to become more effective communicators. They learned how to stand in front of an audience and speak and be, and to show that they had the ability to analyze and to be critical thinkers. So once people started to see the educational value of it, there was buy-in, but clearly in the beginning, there was resistance, and there was people who were making mockery of what it was that we're accomplishing. And now, that's all you see. Every time I turn on, people are always emailing me things. Look at this person, they're using hip hop in school, and I chuckle to myself because clearly they were influenced by the work we did back then. We were in Tribeca Film Festival 2 years in a row. We were used as a national model for HBO. HBO used us and said to other schools, try to copy something like this. We were on Oprah Winfrey. So what we did it's well publicized. What I decided to do was go back and do the research to understand the educational significance of what it was that we did. Okay, so the way I got the name Dr. Blizzy is that a friend of mine who is a professor and also a hip-hop artist, Maurice Williams, asked me to do a remake of the song Panda. He did a remake, and he wanted to use it to kind of educate students about civil rights. So he changed the song from Panda to Panther, talking about the Black Panther Party. And he played the song, and I listened to it, and I said, oh man, this is really good. And so he said, you wanna jump on and do the remix with me? And so I did the remix with him, and you know, we put it on SoundCloud. A lot of my students found it, and it created like kind of like a buzz. So he said, you gotta get you a hip hop name. You know, you Dr. Blake, you're the nation's hip hop principal, but you know, when you rap and when you spitting, you know, you gotta, you know, whatever. So I said, well, you know, what should we? She said, we should call you Dr. Blizzy. So I said, well, at first I said, I don't know about that. So then what I did was I started saying it in front of the students. So, you know, I'm Dr. And the response was always like laughter and like immediate, like, oh, I like that, Dr. Blizzy. So between his suggestion and the students' response, that's how I got the name Dr. Blizzy. To answer your question, what makes us stand out is not just what we did, but what we're currently doing. We did the research. We can tell you from a qualitative and quantitative perspective the impact and the significance of using hip hop in urban environments, and how there's a correlation between using this as a communication strategy and improved attendance, improved student outcomes, improved relationships between adults and students within a school. We actually did the research. And so that's what makes us stand out. There's more of a scientific, investigative piece that is involved in our work that allows us now to make the connection with educators, superintendents, school districts, policymakers, heads of universities and teaching programs about how to change the way in which we engage young people so that we can get improved outcomes. Who's my favorite rapper? My favorite rapper, I'm so glad that you asked this question because this ties everything that I've said into one bundle. My favorite rapper is Nas. And he's my favorite rapper because to me, he's not a rapper. He is an MC in the purest definition of what an MC is. He's lyrical, he's original, he's creative, and he's intelligent. Nas raps are more poetry than anything else. All the elements of standard poetry you can find in his music. Personification, imagery, similes, metaphors, the way he tells stories, plots, settings. You can actually listen to a Nas song and actually see it. You can actually close your eyes and see what he is talking about. So here's my question. This is very important. Nas dropped out before going to high school. So what was it about the environment of the school that they didn't realize that they had, as a student, someone who was a mix between Shakespeare and Picasso? How did they miss that? Why wasn't the environment such that it would have cultivated him to do, and he would have excelled in school and loved school because it would have been an environment made for that genius mind? See, the curriculum was too slow and his mind was too fast. And he got bored. And what I find is that all throughout this country, you have a lot of guys who dropped out of high school that are a lot smarter than those of us who went through. But their minds were quicker, the curriculum was slow, and they weren't engaging them. So how many Nas's have we turned out to the street never to make it? How many 50 Cents, who was a phenomenal businessman and never went to business school? How many of them, he dropped out as well. How many of them are dropping out? It's because Nas and 50 made it in spite of. But what would happen if we created the environment where all these little Nas's and 50s would flourish? And that's why I want you hip-hoppers to get with me so that we can create those kind of environments and do something different and do something in a way that really has a positive impact on our community. And I know most of these artists want to do it. They just need the right voice.
Seasons came and changed the